Hi, Bob Cubitt, the author here to tell you another story behind the story of how one of my books came to be written. I'll tell you which book it is at the end because there's a little while to go before we get to that stage because we're starting off not with a story of the book but with some story of some medals. Now, the man in this photograph here is my father, and on his chest you'll see right there, there's a row of medals. Now, the thing about medals on a soldier is they don't just tell you what he's done, they also tell you where he did it. And part of this story, behind the story, is actually the story of those medals. So here are the medals in close up. There's actually an additional one. This one on the end isn't in the photograph because the photograph was taken before my father was awarded that medal. But we'll get to that one a little bit later on. We start off on the left-hand side here. This is the 1939-1945 star. To earn that, you had to be in the army, or in the armed forces at least, at the start of the Second World War. And you still had to be in the armed forces at the end of the Second World War. So you had to serve all 6 years. Next one up is the Africa Star. Now there's actually a bit of a gap at the beginning that's not told by any medal because between 1935 and 1942 my father served in Britain in the Commandos from 1942 onwards. And he carried out, from 1941 onwards, and he carried out a couple of very important commando raids during that period, but they didn't award any medals for them. So there's a little bit of action that goes untold before we get to the Africa Star. And my father's unit, number 3 Commando, were posted to Algeria after the invasion of Morocco and Algeria by joint American and British forces. And then from Algeria, he was sent to Egypt. He didn't get involved in any fighting in Egypt because by that time the fighting in North Africa had already finished. But he and his unit were training for the next big operation, which was the invasion of Sicily and then Italy, which is how he comes to hold that medal, which is the Italy Star. Now, it's quite common to see that one and that one side by side. That's because 8th Army served in North Africa. They fought Rommel's Afrika Korps in North Africa. They then undertook the invasion of Sicily, and then after that they invaded Italy. What's not so common is to see that one and that one side by side. That one is the Northwest Europe Star. You got that if you went ashore in Normandy on D-Day, or if you served afterwards in the Battle for France, the battle for Belgium, Netherlands, and Germany itself. Now, that's the reason why it's quite uncommon, because the 8th Army, who were fighting in Italy, stayed there right up until the end of the war in Europe. So you couldn't be in 2 places at once, obviously. So it was unlikely that an 8th Army unit would also get the Northwest Europe Star. But my father's unit, number 3 Commando, were withdrawn from Italy in 1943, the end of 1943. They were sent back to the UK specifically to train for D-Day, which happened in June 1944, of course. So that's how come he's got the Africa Star, the Italy Star, and the Northwest Europe Star, which is actually quite a rare combination. The next 2 are far more common in terms of medals. There's the Home Defence Medal and the War Service Medal. Pretty much anybody got those. Anybody who wore a uniform, Army, Navy, Air Force, Royal Marines, police, fire, ambulance, and a whole kit and caboodle more, were all given those medals to mark their service during the war. Then we come to the one after the war, which is that one there. That is the General Service Medal, and the clasp on it there says Malaya. Not much is talked about Malaya because it wasn't an officially declared war. It was euphemistically called an emergency. But 1,500 British servicemen, mainly conscripts, died in Malaya, and a whole load more were injured. So that marks the end of the medals that my father received. He came back from Malaya and didn't serve in any combat zones after that. So what we've got is a story that starts out in 1939 and finishes up in the late 1950s there. But there's another story to be told of those medals, and that's what happened to them between the year 2000 and 2016. In 2000, my father was on his way to Dieppe in Normandy for the annual reunion of Number 3 Commando. They always went to Dieppe for reasons that are told in one of my books, and I won't go back over that ground later. But he was at Brighton Station, waiting to join up with all his other old comrades and get the ferry to Normandy, when his bag was stolen, and inside his bag were his medals. Now, as anybody who knows Brighton knows, there's lots and lots of antique dealers, and I dare say some of them may not be totally honest, and therefore there's a ready market to get rid of something like a collection of medals. Anyway, we heard nothing. My father reported them to the police, didn't hear anything back. The family never heard anything. My father passed in 2011, never having seen his medals again. But in 2016, I got a DM on Facebook from someone and said, are these your father's medals? And he sent a photograph of them. And I said, oh, they look familiar. They might be. And I sent him my father's service number so he could check. And if we have a look at this medal here, if you get up close there, you can see that there's some engraving on it. And that's my father's number, rank and name. And it's the only medal that has that engraved on them, because general service medals had that engraved. The other ones, because there were so many people getting them, they didn't bother doing that. But that one has his number, rank and name on it. So I sent that to the guy, and he said, yes, this is your father's medal, and this is your father's medal collection. Would you like them back? Well, I've asked him how he came by them, and he sent me a receipt from a very prestigious auction house, just to prove that he had actually bought them honestly and wasn't actually the thief that stole them back in 2000. And we did a deal and we got them back, and I was delighted to get them back into the family. My brothers and sisters, my children, everybody was delighted to get this medal collection back in the family again. But what have those medals got to do with these cassette tapes? Cassettes, of course, an old form of recording. They were replaced by CDs, and the CD, we don't even bother with CDs anymore because we've all got phones and we use our phones to record. What have the two things got to do with each other? Well, in the 1990s, my dad went to the National Army Museum to record these tapes with a curator from the National Army Museum. It was part of a written history project that the National Army Museum was conducting at that time. They wanted to get as many stories as possible from old soldiers from World War II recorded before those soldiers died, basically, and those stories would be lost forever. So my father went down on 4 separate occasions, which is why there's 4 separate tapes, and he made these recordings. Well, after he died, I was hunting around in my mother's house, as it was by then, looking for something for her, and came across these tapes. And I said, what are these? And she told me. I said, can I have them? And she said, yes, of course you can. Well, I sat down at home and I listened to them. I had to actually buy a CD player in order to listen to them because I didn't have any of that technology myself anymore. And what I heard was fantastic. It was my father's war stories, which he had never told me while he was alive. And I thought, these stories are too good not to be made into a book. And that is how this book, A Commando Story, came to be written. It started off with the medals, then finding the recordings, and then writing the book. Of course, I couldn't just include my father's stories because without context, they didn't make any sense. So I had to do huge amounts of research in order to complete this book. And of course, it wouldn't be complete without some photographs as well. That's a guy called Scotty Scott, who was a friend of my father's, um, and some of his stories are included in the book as well. It's an operational map of one of the operations they carried out, showing what they did. And that is my great-grandmother. It is my grandmother, who I never met. And that's where my father was born and where he grew up. So quite a lot of history inside that one book. I hope you'd like military history, and if you do like military history, maybe you'd like to give that book a go.